Matthew chapter 13. We're looking at the parable of the wheat and the tares. Matthew 13, verse 24 through 30. And Matthew 13 has multiple parables within it. And so what it seems to be is that Jesus would teach and then in parables, and then there may be a small intermission, maybe of questions. We might stop because someone's talking somewhere, and then he'll kind of sandwich it. And so what's happening here is you have the parable given, and then you have him speak another parable, and then he goes back, and he has two more parables after this in verse 31, 32, about parable of mustard seed. 33 is parable of the leaven. And then he goes into 34 and 35 about why he's doing this in parables. And then he kind of goes back to explaining the wheat and the tares. So he's kind of intermingled two parables and explanation in the middle of the parable. But we're going to look at Matthew 13, verse 24 through 30, and then jump down to verse 36 to 43, and that'll give the explanation. Now, verse 24 of Matthew 13, another parable he put forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. But when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the tares also appeared. And so the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us to go and gather them up? And so he said, No, lest while you gather up the tares, you also uproot the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, First, gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Now, a few things. We're going to go ahead and read the whole thing, and then we'll go back and do some commentary on this section. In verse 36, then Jesus sent the multitude away and went into his house, and the disciples came to him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field. And so he answered, Matthew 13, 37, he answered and said to them, He who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seeds are the sons of the kingdom, but the tares are the sons of the wicked one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. Therefore, as the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of this age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and those who practice lawlessness, and will cast them into the furnace of fire, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear. Now, a few things as we notice, and just by way of introduction, in verses 24, 25, and verses 37 to 39 about the sowing. This is a really good parable that illustrates no one is born innately evil. Okay, that is a false doctrine that's been going on for years. It's called the doctrine of original sin. Where it says everyone's born with sin. Everyone's born innately evil until God's righteousness changes them later on. Now, when you look at the sowing here, there was no seed at all in that field. It was planted there. Now, I was talking to a gentleman the other day, and we actually had this exact discussion. And he said that you can never change what you're going to do, that everything is already predisposed to what you're going to do with your life based upon your environment. And so, therefore, if you're raised in a bad home, you're only going to go and do bad things. And if you're raised in a good home, you're only going to do good things. The problem with that is an absolute false. And if you look at, if you just go to a snapshot of all of the kings of Israel and Judah, very common. You'd have a bad king, you have a really good son, and then you have a good king and have a bad son. And it's all depending upon their choice that they make. No one is going to force them into, I say that. People have been forced into things, but no one's going to force them to stay there throughout their whole life. You have to make a change. And whenever I was doing prison work, that was always a thing because, we'd have guys that were in gangs in there for different reasons. And they'd always say, I was here because I was in the wrong gang. Well, yes, you were, but you're also because you made a choice as you're part of that gang. You are the one that pulled the trigger. They didn't make you. Now they said do this or they might threaten you, but they didn't make you in the end pull that trigger. You decided for yourself to do that. And so therefore you have to have those consequences behind your actions. And right here, I think it's the same thing, that no one is born innately evil. The seed is planted. And so the sowing here illustrates the fact that both good and evil were planted. Now, why I did say about the force thing, because I do know of several, whenever we were a foster family, I know of several children that were injected with drugs by their parents when they were little bitty kids. And then they had to form an addiction, and they didn't have any choice in the matter. So I do understand that side of the world too, to a small degree. But it still comes down to choice at the end. But when you become an adult, you can now decide whether or not I want to make the commitment to get my life straightened out or not. And so that's the thing, what's going on right here. We're dealing with accountable individuals. We're dealing with also the very fact, again, that there is not any kind of innately wrong soil here. Everyone in this world starts out as innocent. And then these things, good and bad, were both planted. So, very important. The good seed. What do we know about the good seed? Who's the source of the good seed? God. Okay. Verse 37, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Now, there's a lot of discussion if you ever want to read about the Son of Man. I know a lot of people really go into Mark on this, but Son of Man is often associated with the human side of Jesus. But also, I think, based upon further research, it emphasizes his messiahship, whereas the Son of God emphasizes the deity that matches that. So they both are going hand in hand there. So the Son of Man is the one that sows the good seed. And what's the field here? The world. Yeah. And from Psalm 2, verse number 8, we see about the world that Christ is the rightful owner of the world. No one else owns the world. Now you have verses like 2 Corinthians 4, verse 4, where it talks about the God of this world being the devil, the prince of darkness, the great adversary, 1 Peter 5, 8. But the one that really is the rightful owner of the world is Jesus. That's Hebrews 1, 1 through 3. And so the good seed are who? According to the verses here between verses 37 and 38. Who are the good seed? Yep. I hear it being whispered. Who are the good seed? Us. Yeah. All right. In this verse, it talks about being sons of the kingdom. Now, that's a very powerful language. Could you imagine that you are not just simply called a child of God, which you are, but you are a son and daughter of the kingdom? And so, therefore, we see some citizenship here. We see some duties that go along and obligations we have, but also we see the rightful owner of us. That would be dealing with the authority of Jesus here from John 1, verse 12, how he gave everyone the right to be called the children of God. That was all through Christ's authority. And so the field here is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom. But the evil seed comes in. Who sowed the evil seed? The devil. All right. Now, the devil, the enemy who sowed them is the devil. It's interesting here that devil is one of the many names of Satan, and devil is the adversarial name of Satan. And so this is the one who, and it appears as though from the verses that the good seed was there first. And then he came in and sowed later. And that's how it always happens. There's always something good first, and then he comes in and really makes things that ought to be good bad. Now, of course, inside of our current world, we might think about certain things that are good, but when they are done in great excesses into self-indulgences, become bad. And so that's why you have verses like Philippians 4, verse 5, let your life be one of moderation. That word also means contentment. And the Christian life is one about self-control. And you see that inside of the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5, verse 22 to 25 there, as well as other verses. You see other verses like Proverbs where it says, the mighty one is not the one that can rule the city, but the one that can rule his spirit. And so the devil, though, is going to come in and destroy. And this is what I would view as kind of destroy from the inside going out. Because when the things are sowed, they didn't know it was there until they saw the fruit of it. And so the devil's the one that sowed it, an enemy of the Son of Man, a silent, unseen sower moving in the darkness. Now, what does he sow? What did he plant? Tares. Does anyone know what a tare is? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And some versions actually use the word darnel here instead of the word tares. Yeah, exactly right. A plant resembling wheat, and it represents the sons of the evil one. So he wants his sons to resemble the sons of God enough to deceive and to be deceived, yet evil enough to be damned. Well, that was interesting. Where he sows it. Where did he sow the tares at? In the same field. The same exact field. Now, that was a case of agricultural warfare. If you had an enemy, you would go out and do this. You might put salt in the field. You might remove certain things that they need, like manure and other fertilizers type thing. You might steal some stock, cows and sheep and goats. It's all about agricultural warfare in this parable. But either way, it still is on the home turf. And I think that whenever you look at worldliness and the idea of being tempted, you don't got to go very far from your house to be tempted. I believe most, if not all, temptation that we face comes from within the home as much as it does from without. And so we have to be very mindful then to have our homes as strong as we possibly can to not only see it, but to be strong and preserve and persevere through these evil times. And that's why you have verses like 1 Corinthians 10, verse 12, where it says, take heed lest you fall. Because you can actually fall. But you have to be warned and look out. And don't let the evil one come in. And so among these, a common device in those days was again to wreak vengeance among the wheat, near enough to entangle and to sap the life of it. Now you see the period of growing here between verses 26 and 30. As was mentioned by Craig, only after a certain period of growth did the difference between the wheat and the tares become manifest. It was during this period that the servants appeared. Now, what was the servants' reaction to the wheat, well, to the tares, really, in verse 27? Rip them out. Were they surprised, do you think? Sure. They said, we thought you only planted wheat. What happened? Okay. So there is a surprise. And so I have a little note here. After all efforts to do good, evil men are still in abundance. Now, the proposal, though, which is already mentioned, was, what are they going to do? He said to them, do you want us to go then and gather them up? The proposal. This was to, inside of our more religious setting, to go against their error. Do you want us to go out there and attack the error that is being taught and being preached and practiced? Because too much carnal heat was present. But then, what was the reaction of the owner after he heard them say, do you want us to go over there and get this stuff taken care of? What did he want? Go ahead.
I'm pretty particular about my yard. I have a nice yard. I can't stand weeds. Well, I keep weed killer, I do everything. Like what I did this past winter was the weeds start coming up. What I did this winter, and the other winter, I let the weeds grow. Because I need my grass to help. And what I did after that, I pulled the weeds to get them up. I actually hand pulled. Out there, it took me about 4 days to clear that yard off of weed. But I can see the difference now. Then I came back to it with fertilizer. So the example that he said, leave the weeds and everything and we let it grow. Because the easy way to get them up is you don't want to kill the harvest. If you got to pull the weed with it right then, that's kill the harvest because the weeds is already overtaking the weeds.
Yeah.
And see, now we look at it like the world is okay. It's a good example of that for us. We got the world is mixed with good and evil, which people decide from within themselves. And that's the way the world regulates. The person, we have to physically decide how we gonna be. Evil don't just come up in our minds. It don't. That's something that's hard consider it than people who are inconsiderate of themselves. And, that's another good way to look at this, like they said. They say the bad circumstances, so it was good. It was good seed, so it would be where the weeds come from. It was some enemy who did this, eat natural. And see, that's the key. Something had to cause those weeds to form.
Hmm. Yeah.
They had to come from somewhere to even mingle with the good.
Right.
And it'll be noticeable with the good. And
Right.
that's why we got this intermingling now, where good and evil is together. And there's nothing you can do to separate it until you get to that time where you can put it up and actually take the weeds out and use the wheat, use the tail.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think also, especially like just looking at it from when Craig said what the TARs, is it TARs or TARs?
Tears, but
TARs are, he said that they look the same in their infancy. So what a lot of people, like looking at this scripture, what I get from it is like, when it comes to your faith, your belief, you're gonna be around things that look similar to you, that might seem the same, especially when it comes to religion. There's a lot of different congregations that they say that they're preaching the same thing and they're doing the same thing. But I think once you get more mature, you're able to separate yourselves and people are able to see the difference between your spiritual growth in the word than that of the TARs or TARs, whatever it's called. So, this is a good verse, especially for the youth.
Yep.
Teenage youth, that they kind of like want to fit in and they have some struggles as far as, I want to look the same or act the same or be the same, or kind of like, it's like once you mature in what you believe in, then it's kind of like you're able to separate yourself. Like, you're weak and these are.
yeah. Yeah. Now, Richard, what you got? Steve,
I was just gonna say,
you got a haircut. What you got?
I don't wanna go too far, but, referring to the harvest time, when the harvest, it's time to collect the wheat, if you will. It's gonna be obvious what's the true wheat and what's not. And, that's gonna be the same way it's gonna be judgment day. When we go before the Lord, it's gonna be obvious who the followers of Christ are, who the
Yes.
So, I don't know, I've had gardens before and I've seen weeds come up along with plants and you can't tell the difference in them in the beginning. But it's going to be very obvious in the end,
Right.
the difference.
Right. Right. And, yeah. Because, whenever you, have y'all ever planted new seed in your yard? The fastest way to grow new seed in your yard? It's not to plant it, it's to burn everything. That's what they say. If you want to get a brand new yard tomorrow, you got to go out there and you can do a chemical. And what it does is it burns everything. It's kind of scorched earth policy. And that way you take care of everything. And the reason behind that is because the seed, the healthy roots, are going to stay. And then, obviously, if you plant the same kind of grass, it's going to just mingle up with what's already there. The weeds, though, and the bad grasses that may have been intermingled in there that you did not want to have in your yard, those are going to be burned up because those do not have the same root system. They're not as healthy. And so that's why it's, if you ever go out and plant a very large amount of seed in your yard, instead of having to pull everything out and do the straw and stuff, that's why they say, you do the chemical and you burn everything. That way it keeps all the healthy stuff at the base of it. Same concept, I feel like. Another thing about, anything dealing with, again, the yard, same line is that, of course, the healthy grass is going to be around for longer than the weeds. The weeds kind of come up overnight, don't they? You mow here or there, or you go out to the garden and you get everything up. You used to have your nice plants, but you pull up all those weeds, and then lo and behold, here they are again 2-3 weeks later, and they come back up again. Well, you already got them the first time. What's interesting though is that the normal weed is also a lot more aerodynamic than the normal seed. Seeds are a little bit heavier by nature, but weeds are able to be moved around by the wind. And that's why you can't control a lot of that stuff, because the wind's getting you too much. Very common. Very, very common. So it's one of those things that you kind of, and all that, and you think about Psalm 1, and how there are two things mentioned in Psalm 1. First thing was that says that you should be planted by the rivers of water. That's dealing with you being a tree. A tree with a deep root system at the most ideal place is by those still rivers of water. But in Psalm 1, it says, but the chaff comes in and it gets blown away by the wind. Well, the chaff is a part of the outer coating of the wheat there, and it breaks down, and it's actually toxic, and it's also very, very feeble and very brittle, and so it moves around. And so it's saying that the wicked are like the chaff who are blown around by the wind. They do everything based upon their desires as the wind blows them in that direction. There's not really any kind of real root system. And so right here, I think you see a very similar thing happening here. Of course, we don't see the wind in play, but we see the enemy is in play, who is actively going here. Whereas the wind, I think, is more of a, you can't control the wind, John 3:8 there. But, right here you have the enemy is coming in with a distinct purpose on causing you trouble. Now, I tell you though, I am not a gardener at all. All I did for several years over COVID is I would cut yards. That's one of the things I did that, and I delivered mail. That's how I made my living. And so I did all kind of stuff, learning about yards and cutting stuff from that. But it is very interesting. Go ahead.
Well, this is on the side, but there is a weed. I consider it a weed. It doesn't necessarily grow in your grass, but it grows in your flower bed and in your garden. It's called nutgrass. Now, I know that's not the biological term, but that's what I was always told. It was nutgrass.
That drives you nuts.
Get out there to pull it up, okay? And you pull it up, and you think you've got it. But if you don't go down, there's a nut. It looks like a nut, way down into the soil, and it's like an acorn, and it's very hard. And if you do not dig that out, then that nutgrass is going to come right back in your garden, in your flower bed. And it's tough. It's not something that's going to be blown away. It has to be dug up and thrown away.
Correct. No, I'm saying is the typical weed, though, is all airborne. I'll say every one, but I'm saying the typical one is, though. But yes, that's a good point. Go ahead.
They agree with the Darnell, they used it for a while. There, and beer to get played, and they found out here is a fungus. And the other thing they said was that wheat turns brown when it's used, where there or Darnell turns black.
Yeah.
You can definitely tell the difference. Once they do.
Sure, sure. Well, I'll tell you of another one. It's a good point. Another thing that was put out as being great for your yard, but turned out to be a weed, was kudzu. I know y'all don't have very much kudzu over here, but back where I came from, it has taken over everything, and it's kind of like nutgrass. So back in Georgia, we don't have nutgrass. We have kudzu, and so kudzu was brought over in I think 1800 and something, and it was brought into the World Fair in New York City, and it was portrayed as this is a great, colorful, beautiful plant. It's gonna, beautifully arrange your house and make it more opulent and this kind of things. But then after 50 years of it taking over the world, they said, actually, it's just a big old weed. Well, it's all been 50 years of growing everywhere, so now they can't stop it. But so I think that's another thing. I know there's all kind of stuff, but you can go on that all day. It's a very broad world, that one. But okay. Now, when you look at verse 29 and 30, what was the reaction of the owner at the proposal of the servants? Was he saying, go over there right now and burn everything up? What was his reaction? Come and grow together. So would you say that he showed restraint? Patience? Yeah. All right. Now, verse 29 through 30, there are restraint things seen here. For 3 reasons, the proposal was rejected. Number 1, from Matthew 26, verse 51 and 52, it would seem as though this was a rash decision that they were going to make that was destructive in nature. And it's very similar to what Peter did in the Garden of Gethsemane, where he cut off the ear of the servant of the high priest. And Christ said to him, put your sword in its place, for who take the sword will perish by the sword. Now, was it wrong for Peter to defend Jesus? No. What was wrong about what he did, though? Would you say that Peter acted very harshly, very quickly? Yeah. Yeah. So, this, it would seem to be that the other side of why this proposal was rejected was because of a similar mentality. It would seem that there was some rashness, there was some tendency for destruction. Second thing is that there was a degree of presumptuousness of the servants because they were not the reapers. They were the servants. So if they had gone out and tried to do something, they may have messed it up even more. Okay. And then it was premature, for the time for reaping had not yet come. So therefore he said, let them both grow together until the harvest. And so for that reason, the owner showed great wisdom in how he rejected their proposal. Now it comes to the reaping, and this is verse 30 and verses 39 through 43. Who are the reapers? The natural consequence of every harvest is the reaping. Who are the reapers here?
I would say the angels.
And I'd say you're right. That's what the Bible says they are. The angels are the reapers. Now, the angels have always been associated with death. They've always been associated with bringing, especially a dead saint into paradise. I'm thinking mainly about the account of the rich man and Lazarus. Now it said that Lazarus was essentially hugged inside of the Greek all the way into paradise by the angels. And then you think about other verses like Revelation 14, verse 13, about blessed are they who die in the Lord. And then you think about other verses that the Son of Man will come back. And his second coming is going to come back with who? Angels. 1 Thessalonians 4, 13 through 18. So the reapers are the angels, the avengers of God's wrath, but also the ministers of his mercy. And by that, you think about them being a minister of mercy is, I think about Sodom and Gomorrah. They were given the chance to go out there and find, 50 righteous people. And then we will not destroy this city. And then it went down from 50 to 40 to 30, and you go on down until they couldn't find anybody else but Lot and his family. And who was ready? Who was already there on the ground? 2 angels, weren't they? And Lot had inside of his house. They were ready. But they, I believe, were going to wait and see if there's going to be any mercy before they just acted. They could have come in there and it's taken over the whole thing. One angel, according to the account of Sennacherib, killed 185,000 people in one night. That's a pretty, and even when you think about the Passover, what happened with the Passover? What passed over? An angel of the Lord, didn't it? An angel of the Lord. Now, I know that there was a discussion about that being Jesus pre-incarnate, but either way, it's called an angel of the Lord. And so he was going to go over and he exercised both mercy and vengeance, even in the Passover. So angels have always been associated with avengers of God's wrath or being his ministers of mercy. And so they're going to carry on with that role in this parable. Now, the time of reaping, though, is going to be the harvest. When is the harvest? According to the verses? Judgment. All right. Bible says here in verse 41, he will send out his angels, and that's going to be at the end of the age. Verse 40. Judgment. Okay. But there's going to be, and at the time, the tares are ripe for destruction and the wheat for salvation. Revelation 14:14. There's going to be a separation here. And as you can see there in verses 41, 42, and 43, what's going to happen to the tares? They're going to be burned. And then we see that ever-present description of hell. There will be a furnace of fire, and there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Now, that is a Hebraism, the wailing, gnashing of teeth, and it's commonly associated with Gehenna, which was the Jerusalem junkyard, and that's where they would banish all of the crazy folk. And so what would happen then is that these guys who might have had a few screws loose will go out there and they become very violent, kind of like Legion, who would thrust himself on the fire and hurt himself, and you wouldn't touch him because in his case he had a demon within him. But it was associated, though, that Gehenna, and that's outside of, it was called the Valley of Gehenna, but the outside of Jerusalem had the junkyard and one half of it. And that's where these crazy guys would live at. And so if you went over there and you stay too long, there is a tremendous danger to your life. And so I use that same imagery here, dealing with how violent those individuals are, the unsound mind, and how the tares are going to have to endure that. Can you imagine going through eternity of insanity? And that's what's going to happen. Very scary stuff. You can never do anything at all to get your sanity. because everything around you is going insane. And that's what you have to do for all eternity. But the wheat, though, will go into the barn. And so the righteous, according to verse 43, are under a cloud during the present association with the ungodly. Their light is obscured, but they will shine unhindered when the cloud is removed. That's what I have for my notes here. And that's the idea that while the world is at play, your Christianity, your faith on display may not seem at times to be as bright as it probably ought to be. But by staying true and staying faithful, when it does come time for you to go into heaven, or go before your God in judgment anyways, say that, hopefully you'll go to heaven. I'm sure you will, because I know everyone in here is a faithful, strong, committed Christian who will live obedient unto death. We listen to verse number 10. But we understand, though, that that's when God's going to really show that all that you did really meant something. And your life was actually very important. But sometimes because of the world and how the world acts, it might obscure that fact. Because it's all about trying to make somebody else bigger, and to do that, you gotta become smaller, don't you? It's all about dog eat dog and that kind of thing. And then when you look at all this, notice at verse 43 as well, then the righteous will shine forth as a sun in the kingdom of their Father. So now we understand from verse 43 about in the kingdom is that light also shines through the kingdom. The church is the kingdom, Matthew 16, verse 18 and verse 19, Colossians 1, verse 12 through 14, where it says that we have been conveyed or transferred out of the power of darkness into the kingdom of his dear Son. So the kingdom here is dealing with the church, and we're going to shine forth as a sun in the kingdom. That's S-U-N. That's a very good thing. And so there has always been light associated with us as Christians. And now, without the darkness around, you can shine brighter. But I think also along the same line is that when you think about your own influence, do people find it easier to be a Christian when you're around or not? Well, that goes into how well your light shines, doesn't it? And that's, I think, Matthew 5:16. Let your light so shine before men, the world, and what's going to happen from that? Are they going to ignore you? The Bible says what? Yeah. Let your light so shine before men that they might see your good works. And in doing so, imagine that, the world will glorify your Father who is in heaven. What a wonderful thing. And so that is, I'm going to stop. I'm right on the money. And so next week, if we do come to church, depending on things, we will look at the parables, probably of the mustard seed, the leaven, hidden treasure, and the pearl of great, and the pearl of great price next week. Okay, so go ahead and read it if you want to. If not, that's fine too. But we always encourage any kind of Bible study. But we'll stop there. I'm right on time. Thanks for being in class today. I appreciate y'all very much, and we'll have worship here in a few minutes.